Imagine for a second
Yeah.
that you were standing in a completely pitch black room.
Okay.
Total sensory deprivation.
Yeah.
Just darkness. And then, without any warning at all, someone flips a switch.
Right.
But they don't just turn on a normal 60-watt bulb.
Mm.
They open a shutter. And you are suddenly staring directly into the core of a supernova.
Wow. That is a really intense image to start with.
It would blind you, right? I mean, it wouldn't just be bright. It would be destructive.
Oh, absolutely.
Just too much energy, too much light, too much raw data for the biological mechanism of the human eye to process. You would be completely overwhelmed.
The hardware would fry, the system would just crash.
Exactly. The hardware crashes.
Yeah.
Now, I want you to take that physical metaphor, that idea of being blinded by pure intensity, and apply it to the concept of truth. Capital T, truth.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
What if the actual nature of reality, like what the universe actually is so potent and so raw and simultaneous that the human intellect simply cannot process it without crashing the operating system?
That is a very provocative way to frame it. You are suggesting that what we think we know, our science, our philosophy, our daily life, is just a filtered, safe for consumption version of reality.
Precisely. And that is the philosophical teaser that launches us into today's deep dive. We are exploring this exact idea, the idea that pure truth is too potent for the human intellect to grasp directly.
Right.
Because we can't handle the raw feed, we need parables, we need translations, we need stories to understand what we actually are, because the raw data would just look like static or noise to us.
And this isn't just some abstract philosophy we are spinning here today. This comes directly from the source material we are covering. We were taking a very close look at session 386 of the early sessions, book 8 of the Seth Material.
Date of record, December 7th, 1967.
Yes.
This is a really fascinating moment in the timeline of the Seth channeling, and we are going to tear it apart today. In a good way, of course.
It really is a pivotal moment. And our mission for this deep dive is to explore what makes this specific session so unique. It is an unscheduled, totally spontaneous moment in the Seth lineage that marks a massive shift in the development of the channel Jane Roberts.
Yeah.
But beyond the history, we are going to unpack some truly profound insights on the nature of God, the nature of individuality, and the actual mechanics of reincarnation.
Before we jump into the deep end, and trust me, the water is incredibly deep today. We need to get our housekeeping in order.
Always a good idea.
First off, for everyone listening, please know that this deep dive is distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes.
Yeah.
We are here to learn, to discuss, and to explore these ideas with you.
Correct. And we must give full credit where it is due. The source material we are analyzing today comes from the Seth Material, specifically the early sessions, published by the New Awareness Network.
We are just guides looking at the map. They are the cartographers.
Exactly. We highly, highly encourage you to go to the source. Don't just take our word for any of this. Read the books.
You can find them and support the publisher by visiting sethcenter.com/the early sessions.
Yes, sethcenter.com/the early sessions. There is really nothing like reading the raw sessions yourself. The nuance is all in the text. We can summarize, but the original text has a very specific energy to it.
Okay, let's set the scene. We need to catch the vibe of December 7, 1967. It's a Thursday night. We are in Elmira, New York, in the apartment of Jane Roberts and Rob Butts. But this is not a formal sit-down session where Rob is ready with his pen and notebook at his usual spot.
Right. This is a Thursday night ESP class.
And that context is vital, isn't it?
It changes everything. Usually, Seth sessions were these dedicated, scheduled events, Monday and Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. It was a discipline. It was almost like a job.
But this one?
This one was unscheduled. It was not planned at all. It just happened.
It feels more like jazz, right? Like an improvisation.
That is a great analogy. Unlike previous sessions we have analyzed, where there is a sense of ritual preparation, this adds a layer of spontaneity. It feels authentic in a totally different way because it just popped up in the middle of a class.
Yeah.
Jane was teaching. People were probably drinking coffee, smoking cigarettes. Jane was a heavy smoker back then, and suddenly the energy in the room just shifted.
And there's a specific detail about the physical setup of the room that makes this session a true milestone. We call this the case of the missing husband.
Yes, the missing husband. This is the very first session where Rob Jane's husband and the dedicated scribe who wrote down almost every single word Seth ever spoke was not physically present in the room when it started.
That is huge. Usually, Rob is the anchor. She is the safety net for Jane. He's the one sitting right there. So where was he?
He was actually working in his art studio. Now, for those who don't know the layout of their apartment, the studio was at the very back. He was separated from the living room where the class was being held. by a long hallway and 2 closed doors.
2 closed doors. So he is totally checked out doing his art thing.
Well, he was actually working on the index for the past sessions, so he was immersed in the material mentally, essentially in librarian mode, but physically he was completely removed. He describes the back room as being very quiet. He was in his own world.
But he is the scribe. If Seth comes through and starts dropping knowledge bombs, and Rob isn't there to write it down, does it even count? How did he handle this?
This is where we get the eavesdropping scribe. Rob says that despite the distance on the 2 closed doors, he heard the shift almost at once. He heard the session begin. It is like he was perfectly tuned to that specific frequency.
He's got that ear for it.
He really does. And this shows his incredible dedication. He didn't rush into the room and disrupt the flow of the class. He didn't burst in shouting, "Wait, let me get my pen."
Right.
He wanted to capture it, but he respected the class environment. So he improvised. He opened one of the 2 doors, the one to his studio, just a tiny crack. But he left the second door, the one to the living room, totally closed.
That is wild.
He stood there, essentially in the hallway or the threshold, taking shorthand notes through a cracked door, listening to his wife's voice, altered by Seth, coming through the wood.
I just love that image. It is so stealthy. It really adds to that fly-on-the-wall feeling of this deep dive. We are listening in on something that wasn't meant for the public record initially. It is messy. It is real.
It speaks to the relaxed nature of the whole event, but there is a much deeper psychological implication here regarding Jane, the channel herself.
Right. Let's talk about Jane for a second. Why does it matter so much that she did this without Rob holding her hand, metaphorically speaking?
Well, earlier that day, Rob notes that Jane made a very casual remark. She said that if she felt like it, she would let Seth come through during class that night.
If she felt like it. That sounds so breezy, like deciding if she wants to wear a certain scarf or order a pizza.
Precisely, and that casualness is the actual breakthrough. In the early days, channeling was a heavy, serious, and honestly somewhat scary undertaking for her. There was a lot of fear about control, about what was happening to her mind and body.
Yeah, she was terrified of losing herself.
Exactly. But here, we see a shift toward increasing confidence. Rob notes this as a massive step forward. It shows a wholehearted acceptance of her abilities. It is shifting from a controlled experiment to a natural, integrated part of her personality. She didn't need the safety net of Rob sitting right there to verify it or protect her. She just let it happen.
She is completely owning it.
She is. And she is doing it in front of an audience, which brings us to the witnesses.
Who was in the room? Who got to see this spontaneous eruption of the Seth personality? Let's list these out.
We have 3 specific names recorded for this class. Number 1, Audrey Shepherd. Number 2, Ruth Chatfield. And number 3, Venice McCullough.
A trio of witnesses. Were they regulars to the Seth phenomenon?
It was a mix. Venice McCullough had seen a session before, so she vaguely knew what to expect. But for Audrey and Ruth, this was an entirely new frontier.
Imagine that.
Right. Imagine being in a casual Thursday night class, thinking you are going to learn about card guessing or seeing auras, and suddenly the instructor's voice changes, her mannerisms completely change, her glasses get tossed onto the table, and this entity begins speaking with absolute booming authority. For them, it must have been electrifying.
It sets the stage perfectly. You have the skeptical but supportive husband listening through a door, a group of students wondering what is about to happen, and Jane, fully confident, stepping aside to let Seth take the microphone.
And when Seth does take the microphone, he doesn't start with small talk about the weather. He goes straight for the jugular of human understanding.
Let's get right into that. This is our first major theme, the nature of truth and the limitation of the intellect. Seth opens with a statement that essentially puts the human brain firmly in its place.
He says, and I quote, "You cannot understand nor intellectually grasp pure truth."
Ouch. That is a bit of a slap to the ego, isn't it?
A little bit.
I mean, we pride ourselves on our intellect. We build skyscrapers. We went to the moon. We invented the internet. And Seth is essentially saying, sorry, you can't grasp the real stuff.
But you have to realize it is not an insult. It is a statement of mechanical limitation. Think of it like a dog trying to understand calculus. It is not that the dog is bad or stupid in its own context. It is just that its biological apparatus isn't designed for that level of abstraction.
Right.
Seth explains that because we cannot grasp pure truth, and I quote again, it therefore must be given in terms that you can understand, in parables.
In parables. That immediately makes me think of religious texts, the Bible, the Quran, Zen koans. They all use stories.
Exactly. And Seth is validating that ancient method. He's saying that if you tried to feed the raw data of the universe into a physical brain, it wouldn't compute. It would just be static. The reality is too multidimensional. It is too simultaneous.
And our brains are linear.
Yes. We need a story. We need a beginning, a middle, and an end to make sense of a reality that actually has no beginning or end.
So the parable is like a compression algorithm.
That is a brilliant way to put it. It compresses the infinite into a format that the finite mind can actually play back. It is a zip file for the soul.
I love that, a zip file for the soul. Seth goes on to describe the structure of the self in relation to this truth. He says, one part of the self is pure truth. The other portions of the personality need translation and interpretation.
This is what we call the dual self concept. It implies that there is a core you and an inner self that is the truth. It doesn't need to learn it. It is it. But the part of you that is listening to this deep dive right now, the part that worries about paying the rent or what to make for dinner, that part needs translation.
I promised an analogy earlier with the supernova, but I think the computer operating system works even better here to explain this specific distinction.
Let's unpack that OS analogy.
Okay, so deep down in your computer, there is binary code.
The ones and zeros.
Exactly. Just raw electricity switching on and off millions of times a second. That is the pure truth of the computer. That is the reality of the machine. But if I showed you a screen full of ones and zeros, you wouldn't know how to send an email. You would be totally lost.
Right. It would be meaningless to me. I need the icons. I need the mouse cursor. I need the user interface.
Exactly. The user interface is the translation. It turns the raw truth of the code into parables we can understand. Files, folders, trash cans, these things don't actually exist in the code. There's no physical folder inside your laptop. They are metaphors to help us interact with the energy.
And to take it a step further, Seth notes that these translated parts do not understand what they are. The folder icon on your desktop doesn't know it is actually a string of binary code. It thinks it is a folder.
That is slightly terrifying when you apply it to humans. It is existential dread in a nutshell.
It really is. We are the folder icons. We think we are these physical bodies walking around, separate from everything else, but we are actually just the user interface for a much deeper, energetic truth.
So if we are just the interface, how do we access the code? How do we get to the good stuff? If the intellect is blocked by design, is there a back door?
Seth addresses this in our second theme, individuality and the expression of God. He tells the class, you exist in more dimensions than you know.
There is that multidimensionality concept again.
Yes, but here's the key. He says reality transcends your understanding and transcends the limitations of your own intellectual knowledge. So you cannot think your way there. You have to feel your way there.
He says these truths must be understood intuitively.
Intuition is the bridge. If the intellect is the user interface, intuition is like the developer console. It is a hack directly into the code. Seth advises finding quiet moments of existence to realize your part in creation.
It sounds a bit like meditation, but it feels more active than that. It is about catching yourself existing in the moment.
And the payoff for this intuitive work is massive. This leads to perhaps the most beautiful quote in the entire session. Seth says, through your own individuality, what you call God expresses himself and is known.
Let's pause on that. That is huge. Through your own individuality, what you call God expresses himself.
This completely reframes the traditional Western view of God.
Right, because usually we think of God as this giant figure up in the clouds, and we're down here, these tiny little ants. Maybe we are annoying him, maybe we are pleasing him, but we are definitely separate. He is the potter, and we are just the clay.
Seth flips that entirely. He is saying God isn't a distant ruler watching the show from the balcony. God is experiencing reality through us. You are the eyes and ears of God. Your specific, unique, quirky individuality isn't a mistake. It is the exact mechanism by which the divine knows itself.
So being me with all my flaws, my weird hobbies, my specific sense of humor is actually a divine requirement.
It is essential. If you weren't you, God would be missing a piece of the experience. The universe would be incomplete without your specific perspective.
That is incredibly validating. It takes all the pressure off trying to be perfect or holy in a generic, standardized way. The holiest thing you can be is authentically yourself.
Exactly. And Seth connects this theological idea to a very physical, tangible example for the class. He talks about the energy of the universe.
He says the energy that moves through the universe moves the muscles of your hand, as you write.
This is where we should do a little experiment with the listener. I think it really helps to ground this concept in reality.
Yes, let's do it. If you are listening to this right now, unless you are driving a forklift or operating heavy machinery. Take a look at your hand. Just hold it up in front of you. Wiggle your fingers, clench a fist, open it back up.
Now ask yourself, what is actually powering that movement? You might say muscles or nerves or the calories from the sandwich you ate for lunch. But go deeper. What powers the atoms in those cells? What keeps the electrons spinning?
Seth is saying that the exact same force that explodes stars, the same force that spins galaxies, is the exact same force wiggling your pinky finger right now.
There is no separation in the energy supply. It is not like God has the high voltage line and we are running on cheap AA batteries. It is all the same juice. We are plugged directly into the main line of creation.
But here's the paradox, right?
Yeah.
Seth says you have it, but you do not realize the knowledge that you have.
We are sitting on a gold mine, but we are begging for pennies. We have the energy of the universe flowing through us constantly, but we identify with the limitation, not the source. We identify with the folder icon, not the code.
That is a relaxed but chilling thought, as we promised. It is empowering, sure, but it also puts a lot of responsibility on us. If I have the energy of the universe in my hand, I should probably be very careful what I do with it.
Absolutely. And this discussion of energy and connection leads perfectly into the emotional heart of this session. We have been very philosophical so far, dealing with high-level cosmic concepts, but now Seth gets very personal with the class.
This is theme 3, Life Meets Life. We need to talk about Audrey Shepherd.
Right. Audrey was one of the attendees we mentioned earlier. And based on the context of the session notes, she was grieving. She had recently lost a son.
And in the middle of this grand philosophical discourse, Seth pivots to address her pain directly. What does he say to her?
He starts with a reassurance of continuity. He says, "Those who survive physical death are individuals, as they have always been."
That is comforting. You don't just dissolve into a generic blob of cosmic energy. You stay you.
Correct. Individuality is cherished in the Seth philosophy. But then he defines communication between the living and the dead in a truly beautiful phrase. He says, when communication is set up with those within your physical system, then indeed life meets life.
Life meets life, not life meets death.
Exactly. He is refusing to categorize the deceased as dead in the way we traditionally understand it. They're just life operating in a different frequency.
He tells her, the person that you seek is here, but he is with you and is never parted from you.
This completely challenges the spatial idea of death, the idea that they went away to heaven or another plane that is far, far away across the universe. Seth is saying, no, the separation is an illusion of perception, not a reality of location. He says, even though he continues his existence in another dimension, you are not divided nor separated.
And then he drops a really fascinating nugget about the benefit of this connection. It is not just about emotional comfort, it is actually about learning.
Yes. This is a key insight that I think often gets missed in grief counseling or spiritual discussions. He tells Audrey, you'll gain from his added development, for he will telepathically let you understand matters that you did not understand before.
Wait, let's break that down. So the deceased person is continuing to learn and grow.
Yes. They aren't frozen in amber. They are actively evolving in their new environment.
And they can share that new knowledge back with us.
Telepathically, yes. It suggests a deeply symbiotic relationship. The living and the dead can help each other evolve. The son learns things in his new dimension and telepathically uploads that understanding to his mother. She might just think she's having a sudden realization or change in perspective during her day, but it is actually a gift from him.
That completely changes how we think about grief. It is not just letting go and moving on. It is adapting to a new form of communication.
It frames grief not as the end of a relationship, but as the transition of a relationship to a purely telepathic, intuitive level. It gives a profound purpose to the connection.
Heavy stuff. Beautiful, but really heavy. And I think Seth, or maybe Jane, sensed the weight of the room in that moment because we get a sudden shift in tone.
We do. And this brings us to theme 4, the mechanics of the channel itself.
Seth stops being the wise cosmic sage for a second and becomes almost apologetic.
He does. He greets the group heartily, but then he explicitly apologizes for the sound of his voice.
He says, I regret that through the channels of communication, my voice does not always sound as genial as I desire.
He blames the vocal cords and other mechanisms.
I find this so funny and humanizing. Here's this multidimensional entity who can casually explain the nature of God, but he is frustrated that he can't get Jane's vocal cords to sound friendly enough.
It highlights the hardware constraints of channeling. He is running high-end, complex software on a biological machine. Sometimes the speakers, literally the vocal cords, don't output the tone he actually wants. Seth was known for having a deep, booming, sometimes harsh voice in these early sessions. He knows it can be off-putting to new people.
It reminds us that there is a real distinction between Seth and Jane. He is operating a vehicle, and sometimes the vehicle is a bit stiff to drive.
And acknowledging that stiffness, he offers an out. He says, now we shall let Rupert take a break or end the session at his discretion.
Rupert being his specific name for Jane.
Yes, he always calls her Rupert. It represents her larger male entity identity, but that is a whole other deep dive for another day. The point is, he is giving the physical host control. He respects the biological limits of her body.
And the notes show they did take a break. It was about 9:58 p.m. They took a breather until 10:06 p.m.
Which is a classic class break. Everyone probably stretched their legs, maybe had a cigarette, again, this is the 1960s, poured some more coffee, and just processed what they just heard.
But when they came back at 10:15, Seth didn't just wrap up with a good night and thanks for coming. He went straight into what we are calling Theme 5, the time traveler.
This is where the session shifts from general sweeping philosophy to highly specific evidential data. He turns his attention back to Audrey Shepherd and starts reading her file, so to speak.
He starts giving her reincarnational data, past lives. And he gets incredibly specific.
He does. He starts describing a life in what is now, or what was, Warsaw.
Warsaw, Poland.
Okay, he describes a boy. He notes relatives from Russia, and then he actually attempts a specific name.
This is interesting because Rob writes down his phonetic interpretation of the sound through the cracked door.
Rob writes, Myshurek, M-Y-S-H-U-R-E-K. He clearly notes it is just his phonetic interpretation.
So Seth is actively trying to push a specific Polish surname through Jane's American vocal cords.
Right, and he adds more details. A trader, a merchant, 4 children, a French wife.
That is such a specific, random cluster of details. A Polish merchant with a French wife.
It has the ring of truth specifically because it is weird. If you were just making it up on the spot, you might say he was a Polish farmer with a Polish wife. But a French wife implies a real story. It implies travel, trade routes, maybe business connections that cross borders. It builds a picture of a cosmopolitan life.
And he doesn't stop there. He gives a rapid-fire timeline of her other lives.
He lists a Dutch existence in 1242.
1242, very precise.
A Spanish life in the 13th century. And one in what is now the state of California in the very early 1800s.
California in the early 1800s, that would be pre-Gold Rush, the Spanish or Mexican territory era.
Exactly. A very rough frontier time to be alive.
And then he does a tally of her gender experiences across these lives.
He says you have been twice a woman, 3 times a man.
I love this because it completely dismantles the idea that gender is a fixed, eternal quality of the soul. We switch teams.
We absolutely do. It is about balance. You can't understand the full human experience by only playing one role over and over. You need the perspective of both the yin and the yang to evolve.
And Seth explains how this bleed-through affects Audrey right now, sitting in that room in 1967.
He connects her deep past to her present. He says, you are developing along certain lines, your interest in the outdoors now reflecting your earlier male existences.
That is fascinating. So her hobbies, her personality quirks like liking camping or hiking or whatever she was specifically into, aren't just random choices. They are echoes.
They are habits carried over. If you spent a lifetime as a merchant traversing Europe or a pioneer in early California, you probably developed a very strong relationship with the land. That doesn't just vanish when you die. It seeps into the next personality.
It makes you wonder about your own interests. Why am I obsessed with the ocean? Why do I love spicy food? Maybe I was a sailor or lived in India.
It encourages us to look at our preferences as clues to our hidden history. We are essentially walking museums of our past selves.
Seth wraps this up by promising more. He says, we will give you more specific details at a later time, with dates and names.
He is planting a flag. He is saying, I know more, and I can prove it. It leaves the door open for future verification.
And then the session ends. He says, I will indeed leave you, though I will be here. I will not speak again this evening.
I will be here. Again, reinforcing that he doesn't leave the room, he just stops talking. He retracts his energy from the voice box, but the presence remains.
It is a total mic drop moment.
It really is.
So let's try to synthesize this. We have covered a massive amount of ground today. We started with Rob listening through a crack in the door, the eavesdropping scribe.
We moved to the idea that our brains can't handle the truth, so we use parables, the operating system analogy.
We discovered that we are the user interface for God. and that God experiences reality through our unique individuality.
We learn that the dead are still teaching us telepathically, and that our current hobbies might be echoes of a Polish merchant or a California pioneer.
What stands out to me, looking at session 386 as a whole, is the tone. It is what we call the relaxed yet chilling vibe. It is just a Thursday night class. People are probably drinking coffee and smoking, and yet the information coming through is shattering the very boundaries of reality.
It is the domesticity of it that makes it so convincing. If this were delivered on a mountaintop with thunder and lightning, it might feel like a theatrical performance. But delivered in a living room in Elmira with a husband taking notes from the hallway, it feels like facts. It feels like we are just uncovering the physics of the soul.
And that life meets life message, that really sticks with me. The idea that separation is the illusion.
It is the core of the message. We are safe, we are connected, we are eternal.
I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought. We talked about the energy concept earlier. Seth said the energy that moves the universe moves your hand.
Yes.
So here's the question you need to ask yourself. If the energy moving your hand right now is the exact same energy that fuels the sun and spins the galaxy, what does that imply about your responsibility?
That is the big one.
Every time you touch something, every time you write a word, every time you wave at a neighbor, you're literally using the power of the cosmos to do it.
That makes every mundane action a sacred act.
Exactly. You aren't just doing stuff. You are wielding the power of creation. Maybe we should start acting like it.
A profound thought to end on.
Indeed. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into session 386. Again, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Please go to the source. Visit sethcenter.com/the early sessions. Support the New Awareness Network. Buy the books. Read them. Let them change your mind. We are just the trailer. The movie is in the books.
And remember, this deep dive is educational and free, but the real work happens when you turn it off and look at your own life, when you look at your own hand and realize what is actually powering it.
Precisely.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Take care, everyone.
See you next time.